This is Koba-sensei from ITeens Lab. This video is part of a series explaining how to use Unity, which is software for making 3D and 2D games. This is the 5th video in the series. Last time, we wrote a simple script to move a ball. This time, I want to show you how to use something called variables to control the speed of the ball. Variables are extremely important and essential when it comes to programming. Once you get the hang of this, I think your Unity skills will really level up. So, make sure to follow along with this video. By the way, for this session, we'll be continuing from the file we used last time. If you haven't watched the 4th video yet, please check that out first. Alright, let's get started. So, this is the script we wrote last time to move the ball. We created a script called move. It looks something like this. Alright, so this time, I'd like to try rewriting that move script a bit by using something called variables. Let me write today's topic here. Okay, using variables to control the speed of the ball. That's what I'd like to try out this time. Now, I think there are probably some of you who don't really know what a variable is. Well, to put it simply, yeah, it's like a box. In programming, a variable is basically like a box. Well, it's something like a box. Okay, so a variable, if you've ever used Scratch or something similar, you might already have a good idea, but it's often described as being like a box. If you can't quite picture it yet, I think you'll start to understand as you actually use it and get some hands-on experience. So, if you're not really sure what it is, just watch and learn as we go. For example, right here, let's say, a float, speed. Let's create a variable called speed. This is a box for putting a number in. I made a box, and I put a good one in the box. We'll put a value in it. So, what we've written here is a statement. Float speed equals 1, right? Now, this float means, a decimal number. Float means few. So, for example, you can write 0.5, 0.6, or 1.2, things like that. Of course, you can also use whole numbers like 1 or 2. The point is, you can use values like 1.0 or 1.5, so you can assign decimal numbers. When you write a decimal number like this, it means you're creating a box for decimal numbers, called a float. So, the F in float stands for float. Basically, this is the standard way to write it. If that was a bit confusing, let me explain it again. Float means a decimal point. It means you're creating a box that can hold decimal numbers. And inside that box, you can put a decimal like 1.5. The F here indicates that this is a decimal number. So, in this context, float equals decimal. Strictly speaking, that explanation isn't entirely accurate, but for beginners, it's fine to just think of float as meaning a decimal number. I think that's a good way to approach it for now. So, what's the benefit of creating this kind of box? Well, for example, here. In the previous video, which was episode 4, we talked about how multiplying this vector 3 dot forward by a number changes the speed of the ball. Right? This is 0.1f. Let's try making the speed a bit faster. Okay, now let's see what happens when it's set to 0.5f. Alright, it got faster, didn't it? So, like this, by changing the number you set here, you can change the speed of the ball. So, I'll write the speed here. So, here, we've put the decimal number 1.5 into the box we made. And when you want to control the speed, you should write your program so that it takes the number out of the box and uses it. So, why is this a good thing? For example, let's say we're actually changing the speed here, and we want to monitor what the current speed is using the debug log. So, let's try writing it like this. This is for the debug log. On the console screen, it's called speed. Yes, what's inside the box? That's what this means. With the debug log, this variable, you can just write it as is. But there's something I want you to be careful about with the debug log. Okay, if you just write speed like this, what will actually be displayed is the word speed itself. So, make sure you remember the difference between these two. For debug logs, if it's a variable, you can write it as is, but if you want to display it as text, you need to put it in double quotes. I think this explanation alone might be a bit hard to understand, so let's actually take a look at it. Alright. I'll save it by pressing Ctrl+S. Then, let's try running it. Alright, so this is at 1.5 speed. It's really fast, isn't it? Okay, let's take a look at the console. As you can see, this is the debug log from earlier. It's being displayed here. The first line is written in this style, and the second line is written in that style. The one with double quotation marks, yes. If you look at it, the first line shows 1.5. And on the second line, the word speed is displayed. Since it's 1.5 speed, well, in order, So, it's being called about every 0.02 seconds. If you look here, as I mentioned earlier, this way of writing displays the contents of the speed box, and when you enclose something in double quotation marks, it means that the text inside will be displayed exactly as it is. So, please remember this difference as an important point. Double quotation marks mean that the text inside will be displayed just as it is. Alright. Sorry, that explanation got a bit long. So, we're actually using this speed twice right now. For example, let's say 1.5 was too fast, so I'll change it to 0.5. I'll go ahead and rewrite it. By doing this, even though I only changed it in one place, it actually updates the number in two places, here and here. Let's take a look. Alright, just like that. The ball is moving more slowly now, and as you can see, 0.5 is also displayed in the console. So, if this one too. Right. Write this side as 1.5f. And let's say we also write 1.5f over here as well. If we do that, and then try to change the speed here to 0.5f, the other one will still stay the same as before. If you want to use the speed value you set here somewhere else as well, then every time you change it, you have to go and change it everywhere. In programming, you usually end up writing a lot of code, so you have to make that change many times. But if you put this value into a variable called speed, think of it as a box, and make it a rule to always take the value from that box, then. Well, as long as you just change what you put into the box at the very beginning. Then everything else after that will be updated all at once. That's the advantage. This is what we call a variable. As for variables, I'm going to avoid getting into too much detail, and instead I want to focus on getting used to them by actually writing and practicing. So, if you're not quite sure about them, let's keep practicing together in this video. And if you still don't get it, I think it might be a good idea to try practicing variables in something like Scratch first. Alright, now there's one more feature I'd like to introduce this time. Here's the variable. This one right here. At the very beginning, we created a box called speed with float speed equals 0.5f. So, making this box, declaring a variable. For example, if we create another one called float speed 2. At this point, we've created a box named speed 2 for the first time. Now, if we put the number 0.1f into that box, this whole process is called declaring in programming language. Basically, from this point on, whenever speed 2 comes up, it refers to this box, so that's what we mean by declaring it. And actually, when you make this declaration, there are two patterns. Yes, public and private. There are two patterns. There are several types besides public and private. But for beginners, you'll mostly use just these two patterns, so as long as you remember these, you'll be fine. Public and private. So, the first one here is public and private. Now, as for what the difference is, honestly, it's kind of hard to explain just with words, so if you're a beginner, I don't think you need to worry too much about the fine details. For now, just remember that there are these two patterns, and watch what I'm about to do. Alright, so here, you see where I'm declaring the variable as float speed equals 0.5f. When you declare a variable like this, you start by adding public at the beginning. Yes, so if you write public float speed, for example, What changes is this part here on the Unity screen. The move script that's attached to the sphere. Now shows this speed 0.5 in the script section. In other words, this is what it means. The variable box we just created, called public float speed, and the value 0.5 that we put in it, are now visible and can be displayed directly in the Unity interface. That's what happens when you make it public. Alright, so actually, public doesn't really mean that, but for beginners, let's start there. That's the point. Please make sure to remember this well when you add public. Right here. Well, in this script, in the inspector, well, this number and variable will appear. It will be displayed. And here. Well, for example, 0.3. Right. Just like this. You'll be able to adjust it to something like 0.3. For now, I've set it to 0.5 over here, but if you set it to 0.3 and play it, it will run at a speed of 0.3. And if you think it should be faster, for example, if you set it to 2, then play it. Yes, it gets faster. This is the speed at 2, in other words. So, for variables that you set as public here, you'll be able to adjust them later from the inspector. Well, there are good things about that, but there are also downsides. So, depending on what you want to do, you'll need to decide whether to make them public or private. Alright. Now, here. Private. This one doesn't come out. The one that goes speed, it won't be displayed in the inspector. Like this, if it's public, it shows up in the inspector. If it's private, it won't show up in the inspector. So, at first, I created a float variable. Yeah, I made a speed variable at the beginning. Let's set the speed to 3. Alright. So, let's say you make it like this. This is how I made it at first, right? Now, here's an important point. If you use public, or, if you leave out private or public, if you leave it out, it will be treated as private by default. Right. So, even though it doesn't say private here, it's actually private. Yes. In this case, the ones marked as public are called public variables, and the ones not marked as public are called private variables. Now, honestly, it doesn't really matter either way. Whether you write private or not, it'll still be private. So, why? Well, it's up to you, but to make things clearer and easier to distinguish, it's better to write private. Is generally considered good practice. So, in this video, I'll make sure to explicitly write private whenever something is private. There's actually a lot more depth to the whole public and private thing, but for this video, I'll stop here. I plan to go into more detail about it in a later video. Oh, sorry, there's just one thing I forgot to mention, so let me write it down here. The variable names are the same. As a general rule, let's make sure not to reuse variable names within the same script. Technically, there are various exceptions, but for this move C# script we just created, when you're writing here, or if you make a different file over here, you don't have to worry about it as much. But basically, within a single file, you shouldn't use the same variable name more than once. Let's make sure to do that. For example, here I've written public float speed. And for the second one, I named it speed2. I used a different name. And for the third one, I named it speed3, so I used a different name again. For example, if I try to create another variable with the same name, it will result in an error like this. Either way, it won't work. The important point is that each variable is like a box, and each box must have its own unique name. You can't use the same name for different boxes, that's the rule. Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you very much. Great job. So, how did you find today's content? Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the variables we covered this time, once you learn them, your programming skills will really level up. And honestly, you can't avoid them. If you want to do programming, you absolutely have to learn about variables, so make sure you really understand them. If you feel like you didn't quite get it, please watch this video as many times as you need. From here on out, we'll keep working with variables and get more familiar with them, so keep practicing and learning. Next time, we'll go even further with this pro. We'll be covering the essential if statements, something you just can't do without in programming. Alright, see you in the next video.